Welcome to this Around the WaterCooler panel session. Today, partnered with Snow Software and with our special guests, Highways England. My name's David Savage. I've got a panel joining me today. I'm going to start just by asking them to introduce themselves and completely arbitrarily, as you're on my screen in the speaker view at the moment. Alastair, would you start by just telling us who you are?
Sure, David. So, Alastair Pooley, CIO of Snow Software.
And you're joined by your colleague. We've got Rebecca on the line as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Trevino, and I lead product marketing and product operations at Snow Software.
Thank you. And lastly, but certainly not least, we've got Victoria from Highways England.
Hi, I'm Vicki Higgin. I'm the CIO from Highways England.
So, Vicky, let's start with you. Let's dive straight into the first question. When we're looking ahead to 2021, what do you think the key challenges are that organisations have to think about when trying to form a strategy?
In terms of what we're looking at the moment, the key things are net zero, obviously, and how does our IT provision support net zero? Digital transformation, that's on everybody's agenda at the moment, obviously. And I think the key thing for IT is we're not setting out a separate IT strategy. It's about how do we bring IT into the business strategy? And how do we support all of the elements of the business going forward? So for us, that's the key challenge, is bringing IT to the table with the business strategy.
And Alastair, is that a view that's shared by Snow Software, or is it slightly different from your perspective?
I think that's something that we're hearing from customers. One of the things I'd add to that is that uncertainty is a real challenge at this point. Everybody I talk to is very much aware that we need to be able to adapt, as predicting events at the moment can be a little challenging, and it certainly varies based on where you are around the world.
That's an interesting point, right? Because Snow Software, whereabouts are you based?
So I'm based out of the UK, but we've got offices in 24 different countries. So when we talk about enabling remote work and dealing with local restrictions, we have an awful lot of different geographies to cater for. My colleague Rebecca has actually been having a real challenge over the last couple of weeks, not so much with the pandemic situation, but the weather in Texas.
Yeah, the irony there.
Yes. Yes, our Swedish staff were laughing at one point because they actually were warmer than Texas, which is not a common occurrence.
It does look like the day after tomorrow has effectively happened in the States. I mean, Rebecca, you're obviously working with Alastair in the UK. Different restrictions, different locations. It does compound to that uncertainty, right?
It's definitely uncertain. You never know. I don't think Al had it on his agenda, help the Texans weatherize through a winter storm. And what happens when not only do I have to enable them for remote work, but what happens when their power goes out? And so I think that's a lot of what IT is having to deal with, is just that unexpected. Because even if we'd had the office open, maybe it would have been an alternative for us to go in maybe keep up work. But really, as a city, we just, the majority of us just stopped working. And so those are those real events that do thwart even the best laid strategies.
If I just stick with you for a second, one of the reasons that we're talking today is because of the 2021 IT priorities report. And that stated that just 14% of organizations had the ability to support digital transformation. And that was linked to reducing risk, controlling spending, the speed and scale was being restricted. And I suppose it's an interesting question around how you can thrive this year rather than just survive. And as someone who's involved in product marketing, you must have an interesting view on how your customers are approaching that particular issue and whether or not, I mean, obviously your report says 14%. Is that something anecdotally that you feel is being backed up in conversation?
2020 was the year that a lot of organizations had to confront digital transformation. A lot of times you felt like, look, that's something I can continue to put off. We had some customers who actually had never deployed anyone remote and had to actually buy laptops because they still operated off of desktop environments. And so it was very real. Now, I think 14% is reflective of the fact that for years we've been hearing the cloud and digital transformation, but there were still laggards within the corporate world, and this was the year that definitely that came affront.
Becky, Highways England, hopefully thriving rather than simply surviving, right?
Yeah, and it's a case of having to. So if you think about the people that rely on us for work, the supply chain, if you think about it from a construction perspective, we have masses of people out there maintaining and operating the roads. We couldn't just pack up and stop work. And in fact, in some areas, we accelerated work. But to enable us to do that, we did, in that week running up to lockdown, deploy more laptops to people that were traditionally desk-based, so call centre operatives, for example, phones, rolling over IVRs so they could work from home, that kind of thing, moving things to cloud that we'd kind of put off and not done, just to make sure that we could keep paying invoices, keep setting people to work, because that for us, that was important, that we didn't stop the supply chain doing the work or getting paid.
Alastair, just picking up on something there and a theme. Obviously, it's really important that the roads are kept in good working order, because just yesterday, at the time of recording, we were listening to Boris Johnson telling us that hopefully by June the 21st, life may return to normal, whatever normal means, after what will nearly be 15 months of this situation by then. But with regards to a potential return to physical workspaces, what do you envisage a hybrid working model looking like in your organisation?
It's an interesting topic, actually. We were quite remote friendly. As I mentioned, we're in lots of different geographies. About a third of our employees aren't at one of our big offices. So we'd actually set everything up to be very easy to use if you were working remotely and couldn't go into one of our sites. So the transition for us was relatively straightforward. People picked up their laptops, they went and worked from home, and they fired up all the same applications that they were. But that hasn't been the experience we've heard from all of our customers. As Rebecca mentioned, we've had people where they went from 0% Teams usage to 100% overnight because they just had to deploy different collaboration technology. But even with that in mind, that we were set up for that kind of remote working, figuring out what happens next is really difficult. So far, our staff have told us they want to work remotely far more often. That means we need very different facilities, so less workstations, more collaboration space, as people start seeing the office as somewhere that they'll want to go to for meetings, to work with their colleagues. And some of the things where you just sit with your head down in your computer for the day, they're more likely to want to do from home going forward. And that takes a while for us to transition. And of course, with a lot of the sites around the world closed, it's not something we've been able to start on. So we've definitely got some work ahead of us on that front.
And I'll throw this open to anyone who wants to jump in, but Alice was talking about the fact that obviously you've got the UK, you've got Sweden, you've got the US, to name but a few. I suppose one of the positives, I suppose, to come out of this, if we can try and phrase it like that, is that the level, there has been a level playing field, rather. Everyone was working from home at one point. And as we return to the office, that isn't going to be the case. And there are lots of stories pre-pandemic of situations where you might have an exec team and, 3 people are based in the UK, 7 people are based in the US. The people in the UK were on the phone. They weren't in the room. Is there a concern that we could slip back to that and miss out on taking advantage of some of the assets that have come through from the situation that we found ourselves in?
So at the moment we're looking at how do we return, and who needs to return. For us, it's not the same answer for everybody. And talking to some of my peers in other organisations, they're doing it on a persona based. So if, for example, if you're in a construction team, you probably need to be in the office, or if you're paying invoices, you don't need to be in the office very often. And so the concern for us is having that hybrid approach, that multi-locational experience for the people that are in the office and for the people that are at home as well. So we've set up a working group between IT, HR and the facilities management team, because this isn't just one person's problem to solve, and we're looking at how do we return, who should return, when we do return, what does the office look like, how does it feel to work there? Are you going to sit at a desk all day, as you probably would before, or are you going to collaborate with people? And that's all the thought process for us at the moment. Pretty similar, and to Alastair said earlier, our employees are telling us that they're enjoying working from home on the whole, and we haven't seen a performance drop either. So why would we return to a very old school way of working? We have the ability to have a mixed workforce.
The office has almost become a sanctuary. Do you think that's something that actually might remain?
Absolutely. So we've kept our offices open all the way through as well. Although, you know, probably reduced down how many floors are open, that kind of thing. We've made them COVID safe, as we've been calling it. And that's very much for a few reasons. People that need that sanctuary for one reason or another, people that are socially isolated, that option there, or people that do need to come in and collaborate in a socially distanced way. Some people have preferred, actually, when joining the company, they preferred to go into the office to pick their kit up rather than having it couriered to them, because they want to feel a sense of where they're going to be working in the future, even though we've offered that option to them. And I do think we have to have something open for the future for those kind of people, because, you know, a bit like you said, you know, particularly some young people that haven't moved out of home yet and they're sitting in their bedroom trying to work, or people that are home sharing, people homeschooling, it's not necessarily good for them. Although we've been, you know, massively responsive to people with family needs. However, we do know that sometimes they want to go away from that and they want to come into the office. So it's always been there for them if they've needed it.
Rebecca, one of the contentious questions, kind of thinking about working environments post-pandemic, has definitely been around salary. And if you look to the States, you know, you can look to Spotify coming out with a very strong working from home policy that's based around inclusion, but it's in contradiction to what Facebook and Twitter have said with regards to the fact that they are going to look to pay people less based on location. What's your view there? Is it a conversation you've started to have? Obviously, the States has a kind of a geographical breadth that the UK doesn't have, that might mean that it's a slightly more acute argument there.
There hasn't been the conversation per se with my team, but it's definitely been a conversation many professionals are having, where there's just a natural fear of what exactly is going to happen as you start making salaries variable. Like, will there remain, for example, higher salaries in IT and development? That's definitely been a concern as we move to a full remote world. But I think it's hard to say what the world will look like post-pandemic with different salaries, because right now, as you aptly said, everybody's working in this all remote environment. So I think we're in this period of this angst of, what do I actually do? Do I move to the mountains into this cheaper location, even though I report into San Francisco? Do I keep that the norm, or is this just my pandemic normal? And then once everybody goes back to a steady state environment, that goes away. And so I think we'll see more of that attention around the salary, of if there creates a two-part kind of organization, those who stay close and those who go to remote. There was the CEO of Zillow wrote an article, I believe it may have been in Forbes, about how we feared creating a two-class system with people that decided to stay close to the office versus those who didn't. And we'll see if that actually pans out, how this relates back to salary, or if we just become an egalitarian type of place, as Spotify came in, where everybody just gets paid based on a skill set. I do think that that's probably a little bit more far off than average, though.
Alastair, Rebecca there mentioned someone who might want to go and live and work in the mountains. If they do, all of a sudden your idea of your network and your infrastructure is suddenly blown from the traditional view. How are you dealing with those particular pressures? Because I've heard a lot of talk around the fact that, you know, it's impossible to secure your infrastructure or your network in a traditional way that we would have thought about it perhaps pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's possible to secure it, but you're right. The traditional way of doing things isn't as effective. I mean, we've spent money on firewalls, Wi-Fi security that, of course, sits and protects these wonderful empty offices, offering nobody any benefit. And instead, everything's focused around endpoint security. Now, we'd actually focused a lot on zero trust as an approach, so single sign-on with strong authentication and identity at the core of all of our security, because we were a very remote set-up company. And that stood us in good stead, because it meant that what we were doing wasn't relying on the things that we had in the office to protect the staff. That said, we have upped a lot of the things that we're doing around cybersecurity awareness, phishing testing, and just trying to equip our staff that bit better. Because although they're still working, people have had their working practices disrupted. We saw a big increase in phishing attacks. We saw some COVID-related phishing attacks, and we recognized that we just had to change what we do to try and equip our staff to really cope with this. I think it was really interesting. One of the things I found helpful was in our IT priorities report, we get quite a lot of feedback from what CIOs and IT leaders are actually doing to adapt for the future. And it comes back to what we kind of opened with. You need to be able to cope with uncertainty. So you need to think about how you're going to have room in your budgets. You're going to need to reevaluate any risks and just understand what your technology estate looks like and how it's being used. Because those are the foundation things that you can do now that'll give you the ability to adapt and change tack if you need to as the year goes on.
Rebecca, if I come back to you, there, Alastair's talking about phishing attacks. There's been a lot of pressure put on technology teams, and I think there was a lot of positive sentiment at the beginning of this situation for those teams. Do you think that's beginning to wane?
I believe that there's still a lot of positive views on the teams. There's still pressure, though, particularly as you mentioned around creating a new environment. Everybody's still uncertain about what this new environment, what essentially the next normal is going to look like. And that's really going to set up IT for an interesting situation. Right now, everybody has goodwill. Like, yes, IT's helped enable me to be remote, but there still are those qualms. Like, we've had a lot of conversations around, if we're going to remain remote, what about my desk? What about my monitor? How do I fully enable on beyond just a laptop? Even for myself was, I do a lot of webinars. So I asked our IT department about a camera, microphone, are there different things? Does that come out of my budget? Does that come out of Al's budget? And so those one-offs are going to definitely rub those relationships. And then there's going to be different aspects of security. And then budget is going to be a challenge for IT departments, where Al wants to give all of us an office chair, all of us a steady Blue Yeti microphone to make sure we have the best webinar discussions, but he's going to rub against his own budget, where he has to balance between, do I make Rebecca happy with the state of end microphone for her webinars, or do I actually keep our organization more secure as person X wants to go to the mountain? So that budget, which we sometimes doesn't always make that IT top 3 list, is going to be constrained in the next year to 2, and we're going to have to make some different choices as to how we allocate those and where we optimize costs to fund these new programs like microphones, chairs, etc.
You point out the Blue Yeti. It is what's sitting in front of me right now. And if you obviously can't see what's facing me, but I've got 3 screens, a light ring. I've got a webcam that I've installed and stuck onto my laptop, downloading extra bits of software. Vicky, how much of a problem is this that people like me have had to adapt our working environments at home and have gone out and bought all sorts of different technology and augmented our normal working environments with extra bits of software, right?
It sounds like my husband's office, actually. Looks like a control centre in there. I think to start off with, it was a problem because we were working to rules of yesteryear. So if we were last year, if we wanted to plug in extra bits and pieces, we would have considered it a security risk, and we would have come down hard on people. I think over time, what we've had to do is adapt and assess things and move quickly. So where people need additional software to do collaboration, for example, I think the Miro board is something that's really taken hold at the moment. Ordinarily we'd say, what do you need that for? And it wouldn't go past the investment process. What we've done is take a step back and look at the new user experience, the way people are working from home, and how do we enable the organisation to remain productive and be able to collaborate whilst everybody's sat at home. So we've changed some of our processes. So the way in which we would security assess, the way in which we would look at architecture, all those kind of things, to move at pace and give people what they need. However, there are some things that we've said absolutely no to because of security risks, or because we don't know enough about that. And for me, I've been really lucky because I have a good relationship with the CEO and with the executive team. And right early doors, we set the parameters around the fact that we're not going to be adding every video application into the ecosystem, and we're not going to be adding every bit of software. And that's for IT to make that decision. and we'll go through the right processes, but we'll adapt our processes so we can make decisions quickly. I'd say to start with, it was a problem because we were still using old school rules in our mind and our processes.
And your CEO was supportive of that. And I just query that because I know I've worked with CEOs who get very excited by new tech, right? And they can quite often have the budget to have exciting gadgets. So I could imagine that's quite a crucial partnership.
Completely. And as I say, early doors, we could have been at we could have been at the mercy of anybody that wanted something, but we made some decisions quickly. So, for example, we were still using Skype at time of lockdown, and Microsoft Teams wasn't due to be rolled out till later. But we knew the functionality, within Teams would actually improve over time through their roadmap. So we could then match whatever other technologies people were looking at. So we took that decision early to push it out, and that's gone down really well. I think the stat was at Christmas we'd run 2 million Microsoft Teams meetings across the company over lockdown. The Microsoft chats, we've got stats around that. So it's gone down well. I think also there's something about people being more prepared to learn, whereas you'd roll something out previously, you'd need a whole training program around it. People just seemed a lot more adaptive and happy to learn through Teams being rolled out and other systems as well.
And look, as a last question, Alastair, yourself and Vicky, you're both CIOs. Vicky there is describing a kind of a user base that sounds a lot more responsive and open to ideas. How much of an opportunity is this for the CIO to lead? How is it changing your role?
It's an interesting one. Being a CIO at a technology company, it hasn't made a huge change for me personally. But talking to peers, talking to customers, I do hear stories of much higher levels of engagement from the business, much greater recognition that technology is absolutely at the heart of everything that most businesses are about. And that's really helping them. They're having different conversations. They've got different levels of access to people because everybody realizes that this is the way things need to go. I was talking to the CIO at Target, big US retailer, and they hit their 2024 sales target for e-commerce, so sort of 4 years worth of growth in just the first 4 weeks of lockdown. And those kind of transformational shifts in what your business is doing have led to some real shifts, I think, in how the CIO and technology is seen in many of those organizations.
Look, I think it's been a truly fascinating discussion. Thank you to all three of you for your time around this virtual water cooler. Thank you as well, of course, to our supporters and partners for this particular event, Snow Software. If you've enjoyed today's session, well, thank you first of all for tuning in. Please do stay around the CIO Water Cooler website where you will find lots more content.